In this video, we're going to look at how to solve equations involving absolute values. What is the definition of absolute value? It means the distance between the number and 0. So if we ask you, what is the absolute value of 3? We use vertical lines, two vertical lines, as the symbol for absolute value. So when you see those two absolute signs and two vertical lines, that means we're asking you the absolute value of 3. Following the definition, it's like asking us, what is the distance between 3 and 0? Graphically, we put the numbers on the number line. 0 is right here, and the 3 is right here. So when we count the units, the distance will be 1 unit, 2 unit, and 3 units from 3 to 0. So that tells us the absolute value of 3 is also 3. So similarly, when we try to find the absolute value of -3, we count the distance from -3 to 0, 1, 2, 3. It's still 3. As we can see, the absolute values turn the inside number, whether positive or negative, to a positive number. There is a case that could be non-positive, and that would be 0, because when you found the distance from 0 to 0, you will get 0. And intuitively, it makes sense because the distance cannot be negative. It has to be non-zero. So the smallest distance we can have is 0. That's the distance from 0 to 0. But all the others will be positive. Well, what if we ask you a different type of question? So on the number line, from which numbers we can find that are, let's say, 2 units away from the number line, from the 0. So let's put 0 here. So which numbers will have will be 2 units away from 0? So we can start from 0 and go to the right 1 unit and then 2 units. So we arrive at 2. Apparently, the distance between 0 and 2 is 2. But we can also start from 0 and move to the left 2 units, 1 and 2. And we're going to arrive at -2. So the answer is there are 2 numbers that are 2 units away from 0. So the other type of question will be, we are asking you the absolute value of which number is going to be equal to 2. That's the same question as I asked. What number are 2 units away from 0? So that's like the absolute value of which number is equal to is equal to 2. So as we saw before, this number inside it, there could be 2 of them. One of them is +2. The other is -2. +2 or -2. Because when we start from 0, there could be 2 directions to go. Either go to the left to get a negative answer, or go to the right to get a positive answer. Well, compared to the previous question, the inside number is given, and we're asking for the distance. But the second type of question is, we know the distance, that is 2. We're asking for the inside number. So which number are 2 units away from 0? And usually the question won't be written with a question mark. So we know if you're looking for unknown, we use the variable to describe it. So we put an x inside of the absolute value sign and equals 2. And we ask you to solve for x. So apparently from that graph, we know that x could be either, the inside number x could be either 2 or -2. There are 2 solutions. Okay, so this is something we should remember. It's not really, it's very intuitive from the graph when you look at the graph. And whenever you see this equation, it's like asking you what number are 2 units away from 0. So you can get immediately 2 answers, 2 and -2. But we could make the inside a little more complicated than just a single variable x. So let's look at an example. What if the inside is 3x minus 1 equals 7? The idea will still be the same. When the inside is an algebraic expression, but we can still call it inside. And you can think of 3x minus 1 as a single number. Once you know the value of x, when you plug in, say if x is, say 3, you can plug in 3 and 3 times 3 and minus 1, you're going to get a single number. So although it looks like a long expression, it's going to be just a number. So treat this 3x minus 1 as the inside or just single number. So when I see absolute value sign, it's like asking me, well, one number, what can be the inside number that are 7 units away from 0? So immediately we know that we got two numbers, one on the right, 7, one on the left side, negative 7. They are both 7 units away from 0. So that tells me the inside number, whatever that is going to be 7, or the inside number is going to be negative 7. So if 3x minus 1 bothers you, I could rewrite the question as this, that absolute value of an inside number is 7, and ask you what the inside number is. And you can tell that inside number is going to be 7 or negative 7. Well, you can plug back in there to check what's the absolute value of 7. It's 7. That's correct. What's the absolute value of negative 7? That is also 7. That is correct. Now, we put the 3x minus 1 back for inside, because what is the inside? The inside is 3x minus 1. So get rid of the word inside. We'll just use it temporarily to help us understand the question. So it's like 3x, the inside, put it back, 3x minus 1 equals 7. Or the inside is 3x minus 1 equals negative 7. So we end up with these two equations. So as you can see, it's like take the inside, whatever that is, 3x minus 1, and set it equal to 7 or negative 7. And then we can see that absolute values are gone. We end up with two equations, 1, 2, but we don't have absolute value signs anymore, so we can get x by itself. So we add 1 to both sides, and we get 3x equals 8. Now we divide both sides by 3, and that gives us x equals 8/3. And similarly, we add 1 to both sides here. We get 3x equals negative 6, and divide both sides by 3, x equals negative 2. So this equation has two answers. One of them is 8/3, the other is negative 2. To check the answer, if you have time, we recommend that you do that. So let's plug the number back into the equation. 3 times 8/3 minus 1 is equal to, now the inside goes first. We multiply these two fractions. 3 reduces 3. That gives us 8. And then minus 1. The inside, 8 minus 1 is 7. That's the absolute value of 7 is equal to 7. So that tells us 8/3 is the answer. Now, plug negative 2 into the equation. So it's 3 times negative 2 minus 1. We simplify that. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. Negative 6 minus 1, that gives us a negative 7. And the absolute value of negative 7 is also equal to 7. So that tells us both answers are correct. A few things we got to be careful is, because some students have the intuition that whenever we do absolute value, we always get a positive. So when they see, oh, the absolute value of negative 1 is equal to positive 1, so they are thinking that when they get the question like this, they could take absolute value of 3x and take absolute value of negative 1 to get, let me write it down here. So they could do this. Okay, absolute value of 3x, and take absolute value of negative 1. And then I got absolute value of 3x is 3x, and the absolute value of negative 1 is 1. Unfortunately, this is incorrect. So let me mark that, and this is incorrect. You can't do that because when you take absolute value, there's no such rule. You can separate it as the absolute value of each of them. You cannot take absolute value of each of them and add them together, first of all. Secondly, absolute value of 3x may not be equal to 3x. You have to know what x is, either positive or negative. So make sure you don't do this way. As you can see, 3x minus 1 stays as 3x minus 1. And the idea is, think of 3x minus 1 as a number. By the way, 3x, when you see minus 1, it doesn't always mean this is going to be negative. For example, when x is 8/3, when you plug in, you actually get a positive 7 inside. So 3x minus 1 does not necessarily mean this negative 1 will become, that when you take absolute value, you get a positive 1. All right, the inside doesn't change. So treat the inside as a single number and set it equal to 7 or negative 7. We're going to summarize the steps in a little bit. So in the second example, we are going to solve for x. But compared to the first example, the outside the absolute value sign on the left-hand side, there's a +1 there. The rule I was trying to use, set the inside equal to 7 or negative 7. On the left-hand side, we only have the absolute value sign. We don't have +1 or -1. So if there's a +1 or -1, you cannot say, let's set the inside equal to the right side. Carry in this +1 outside. We cannot do that. So first thing we have to do is to get the absolute value sign by itself. So we subtract 1 from both sides. Now, we have absolute value of 4x minus 6 equals 7. Now we can treat the inside as a single number. So that's the inside. So if one number are 7 units away from 0, so that number has to be either 7 or negative 7. Well, this number inside is 4x minus 6. So we have 4x minus 6 equals 7, or 4x minus 6 equals negative 7. Again, the idea is, if it still confuses you, what I did is I'm going to replace the inside with the word inside. The 4x minus 6, let's just temporarily forget about 4x minus 6. Just call it inside. So what could be the inside number? If to get absolute value 7, of course, the inside number has to be 7, or the inside number has to be negative 7. And we plug 4x minus 6 back into inside. Because what's inside? Inside is 4x minus 6. What's the inside? The inside is 4x minus 6. So you replace that word inside back with 4x minus 6. Now we get these two equations. So similarly, we can solve for x by adding 6 to both sides and divide both sides by 4. So x will be equal to 13/4 in the first equation. In the second equation, we get 4x equals negative 1 and divide both sides by 4. That gives us x equals negative 1/4. And similarly, you can plug them back to check whether you can get 7. So you do a quick check here. 4 times 13/4, that gives us 13. 13 minus 6, that gives us 7. So that is correct. And similarly, 4 times negative 1/4, that gives us negative 1. And negative 1 minus 6 is negative 7. That also is equal to 7. So if you cannot do that in your head, you can always write it down. But you don't have to show this on your paper. You can do this on your scratch paper. Okay, so that checking part, do it on your scratch paper. All right, so let's summarize the steps of solving an equation involving absolute values. First step is isolate the absolute value expression. For example, when we have that +1 outside the absolute value, and we got to subtract it to get absolute value by itself. After we get absolute value by itself, we can set the quantity inside. So I used to call it inside. So whatever the inside is, you set the inside equal to the right side number or the opposite of that number. And we get two equations, and then we solve each one.